Merhaba, ben Oğuzhan Aygören. Bu hafta Vadi Buluşmalarında benim için çok önemli bir yerde çok özel bir kişiyle beraberiz. Benim de görev aldığım Kaliforniya Üniversitesi Berkeley Haas Business School'da Açık İnovasyonun babası kabul edilen sevgili Profesör Henry Chesbrough. Henry, welcome.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you. Henry is a renowned scholar and a professor at UC Berkeley and currently also appointed at Louis University in Rome as well. So he coined the term open innovation very long time ago, and he has contributed to both to the academic literature, and he has worked a lot in the industry with so many different companies and organizations all over the world. So I'm thrilled, I'm excited to have him, to have this conversation, because I'm also working with him for a very long time, and I get lots of inspiration from him, and I'm really excited to be here with him. So Henry, how do you define yourself, or how would you like to express yourself to our audience?
It's great to be here. I define myself as both an academic and as a manager. Before I became a professor, I worked for more than 10 years in the computer industry. And I spent most of those years at a company named Quantum in the hard disk drive industry. So I myself am familiar with budgets, with reviews, with competitors, the importance of selling, new technologies. I've seen a lot of these things in my own personal work experience. And then more recently, I became an academic, and now I study these as a scholar. So this has really defined my work, both the theory, but also the practice of innovation.
So you came up with this concept of open innovation very long time ago. And maybe we can start from there. I mean, your work experience and your academic experience. So how did you come up with the term? And later I would like to ask its relevance and its state, but I would like to start with its inception.
Sure, I'll give you a bit of a longer explanation because I think you'll see clearly how my own experience as a manager helped me to come up with this idea of open innovation. I mentioned the hard disk drive industry in my years at Quantum. During those years, our biggest competitor with the most advanced research was IBM. IBM actually invented the magnetic disk drive that we were all making and using, and they were doing the fundamental research that advanced the technology in the industry. And we used to love to hire former IBM employees in our company. Now, why would they come? Well, in part they would come because we could give them stock options, which meant that if we were successful, they could make more money than they could working at IBM. But the other thing we had is they could see the results of their work. Because we were a small startup company, IBM was a very large, enormous organization, and even very talented people sometimes wondered, did my work make any difference in this huge organization? So we could offer both of those things. When I became a scholar, I started looking at Xerox, the copier and printer company. Now I was looking at it from the perspective of IBM, not Quantum, the startup. And from Xerox's perspective, they were investing a lot of money in new generations of research and technology. But much of the money, much of the value from those technologies was going elsewhere, away from Xerox, often to those same startup companies. So this dynamic between large companies and small companies grew out of my own experience, both as a manager and then as a scholar. And I realized that we needed a new model of innovation where large companies didn't do everything all on their own, but instead were open to engage with startups, with universities, even in some cases competitors, to find new sources of ideas and technologies and bring them to the market. So this was the basis for open innovation.
And did you expect that open innovation would spread this far? Because I mean, now it has become mainstream. So everybody's talking about open innovation like for more than 20 years. So what was your expectation when you come up with this term?
Truly, I did not expect that more than 20 years later, open innovation would still be important, would still be popular, and that students and managers would care to learn more about it. So I'm really happy that that's been the case, but I'm also a little surprised because innovation is something that's always changing. So it's been great so far, and I hope it continues a while longer, but I know it won't continue forever.
Then actually, let me ask you this question. How did open innovation change throughout this time?
Open innovation has changed a lot. In the first book that I wrote that was published in 2003, there are a series of in-depth case studies, all of them in the high technology sector, all of them in the US, most of them in Silicon Valley. Today, open innovation is a truly global phenomenon, and there are important research programs going on in places like Taiwan, Japan, France, Germany, Italy, maybe even Turkey. So open innovation went from being a very provincial idea, perhaps, to a much more global idea over these past 20 years. And the work of one person is now being carried on by hundreds of scholars that meet every year in the World Open Innovation Conference that will be held in November of 2025 in Bilbao, Spain. We gather every year, and again, it's a global community that comes together to share their experiences, their research, and their practices.
And maybe for the following year, we can have the conference in Turkey, in Istanbul as well. This can be a call for our audience. that would be really nice.
Yes, if there is significant interest, I think we would be interested.
And actually, I'd like to ask you, I mean, at Berkeley, I mean, at this Institute for Business Innovation, you also started Garwood Center for Corporate Innovation, working with all those corporates in terms of open innovation, doing these forums like Berkeley Innovation Forum and World Open Innovation Conference and other gatherings and events. So I would like to ask you, I mean, what's the best way for corporates to work with academia, with Berkeley specifically, and in general, in terms of innovation, what is the best way for the industry to work with academia?
If you listen to academia, they always want corporations to give them more money. And indeed, money is a piece of the relationship that you want to create. But more important than money are the people and the knowledge. So for corporations, it's a very good idea to invest 1 or 3 people that spend a lot of their time working with the university and engaging with the students and the professors to bring back the ideas and knowledge back into the company. So if you think beyond the money to people, to knowledge, and then potentially some projects where you are creating knowledge together. These are some of the ways I think that corporations can get the most out of academia.
Yeah, you also mentioned the term translational research and translational projects between academia and industry. I think you do a lot of work on that as well.
This is something that I've observed at close range in medical schools in the United States, and I think this is true in many countries around the world. You have both research faculty and clinical faculty. The research faculty are scientists doing experiments at the lab bench with mice, with cellular organisms, sometimes with computer simulation. But the clinical faculty, who are in the same buildings, go to the same conferences, read the same journals, the clinical faculty have the job of translating the results of the research into therapies for people to help cure illness in human beings. And this translational step in the medical sector is part and parcel of the mission of every major academic medical center. By contrast, in most business schools, the clinical practice of business has been outsourced to the consulting firms. And the consulting firms do a good job of applying new theories to solve business problems. But the feedback loop from the experience of that project back to the academic teachers and the literature and the learning, that is broken. The consulting firms will explain and promote things that work well for them and then quickly take credit for all of that, not crediting the academics that contributed. Worse, though, is if it doesn't work well. The consulting firms bury the result. They don't want to embarrass their clients and they don't want to embarrass themselves. So we lose all of that feedback. In the academic medical centers, that feedback is part of the research mission. And so this translational research, I think, is something that most business schools would benefit a great deal from embracing, so that both the positive results and the negative results feed back into what we teach our students.
So I think one of the reasons for that is companies are really result oriented, and when they work with consulting firms are actually accountable and responsible for the outcomes and the results. But in the academia, actually we academics do not mostly interested in the results, but maybe the process, the framework, the theories, methodologies. But actually there's also a quote that I like. There is nothing as practical as a good theory. So that's why I believe in academy. So how do you compare since you have this experience from the perspective of a corporate, so what should they expect from academia and what should they expect from this consulting firm? Or are they complements or substitutes to each other?
I do see them as complementary, but my insight about translational research led me to a particular approach that you know about, but our audience has not met yet, and that is bringing together managers from a number of companies into a community. Ours is called the Berkeley Innovation Forum, and the idea is a safe place where managers can share openly both their successes and their failures with one another. So this is not simply benchmarking. We can get into the details about what you did and why did you do it that way? Why didn't you do it this way? How did you sell this to your top management? How did you get budget and funding to do this? These are the questions that benchmarking studies will never tell you. But when you're working next to and engaging with over a coffee or a drink with your work colleagues from different companies, you can share all of these things and learn together. So this, I think, is where this translational research really takes shape.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful way. Since I have experienced it firsthand. And now I'd like to ask about the current situation of this corporate innovation efforts. It started as the R&D efforts, as you mentioned, in the maybe 70s, 80s, 90s. And currently, we have this term called the disruptive economics, disruptive innovation, and all those startups. And in terms of firms' approach to innovation, what has changed? All those efforts, they were once focused inside, but now firms are also chasing startups, looking for investment opportunities or looking for ways to work with the startups. So how do you see that? Are there any good examples that you would like to share about that?
Before I get to the examples, I want to take up your theme about disruption.
Okay.
I was privileged in my time at Harvard Business School, where I taught as a professor for 6 years. I got to teach with Clay Christensen, the originator of disruptive technologies and really disruption theory. And so I got to learn this very well and very deeply. It turned out one of his most extensive empirical examples of disruption was the hard disk drive industry that I had worked in for over 10 years. So I really understood the value of what he figured out. And what he figured out is that innovation does involve R&D and new technology. These remain important. But oftentimes, the problems that corporations encounter with innovation, and I saw this with Xerox, in its innovations is that the business model they've built and they've scaled to execute their current business, that business model is getting disrupted by new trends, by new startups that initially are coming in at the edge of the industry, but slowly eroding the advantages of the company and doing so with a different business model. So this means corporate innovation still needs to develop new research and new technologies, but now we need capabilities to develop new business models as well. So this disruption insight is its innovation is about business models as well as new technologies. And so in the work that I've done since, I've really tried to probe for ways that we can help corporations experiment with new business models and also explore the barriers that arise from the current business model that maybe get in the way of your experiments with new business models, and how you organize to do the new business models alongside the existing one. So these are some of the things that have grown out of Clay Christensen's insights.
Yeah, I mean, I really like him as well. I mean, rest in peace. I mean, he was also a great professor and scholar, working in the consulting industry for a very long time, and then going into Harvard Business School as a professor and coming up with this framework. It also shows on both in your example and Clay Christensen's example, working in the corporate life and then getting into academia looks like a great combo.
And Clay was also in a startup company too, in addition to these other experiences. So he really saw innovation from a number of perspectives, and I think that contributed to his insights.
Yes. Yeah, his insights and your insights, I think they are both influential in so many different ways for so many different organizations across the globe. And now actually I'd like to ask you about the role of Silicon Valley. You are a local in Berkeley, native to Silicon Valley. You lived here for most of your life, and I'd like to ask you about, so what is so special about Silicon Valley, and do firms in other places of the world, I mean, in order to be at the edge of innovation, do they need a connection here, or do they, so what kind of a connection or relationship do firms elsewhere need with Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley is a special place. So one of the things that makes Silicon Valley hard to imitate is that you have great universities, you've got a very rich venture capital sector around those universities, you have all the students, all the startup companies, and you have some very important large companies that are in this ecosystem as well. And so the large companies help to feed ideas, people, technologies into this. So the Silicon Valley brings these different elements together. Very large companies, startup companies, universities, students, venture capital. It all mixes together here quite frequently and quite easily. And I think that flow of knowledge across these different sectors of the economy is the secret sauce to Silicon Valley, and really to any strong innovation ecosystem. You need knowledge flowing in all directions so that many people are experimenting, are investing, all at the same time in different domains. And so this, I think, is how you generate the kind of positive results you see in Silicon Valley.
I would like to ask you about what's the best way for companies outside of US to connect with the Silicon Valley ecosystem. For example, companies in Turkey. I mean, when I talk to those companies, it's just like everybody would like to be here in Silicon Valley, but at the same time, there is a lot of time difference or there is a lot of distance. So it makes it harder for companies to catch up. So they catch up with with the news or with the technologies that are already available. Do you think it's enough for those companies to catch up with that, or is there a better way to follow the innovation?
I think the best way to engage with Silicon Valley is to do business here. If you are simply sending a couple of people for a couple of months and they go around some of the labs and some of the universities and they go back, then you have no translation of the things you're seeing and learning into how that's going to help your business, your customers. But if you have business here with customers here, your customers are going to reward you for the new things. And if you don't do new things, they're going to demand that you move forward. So this is going to help you do that translation so that you don't just learn about some new trend, but you, like AI, for example. But okay, how do we use AI in our business to solve a real customer problem that one of our current customers cares about? That's that translation element. So I think doing some business here, it doesn't have to be the majority of your business, but the US is a huge market. So I think it helps if you approach it not just from a technology standpoint or a research standpoint, but from a business opportunity standpoint.
Actually, there are companies who contacted me as well on this topic, like startups and corporations who would like to do business. But those companies in Turkey or in other places, they have no idea how to approach. Okay, maybe setting up the company is the easiest part, but then getting the clients, talking to them. So are there any suggestions how easy or how difficult is that?
I do have at least one suggestion, and here I have to give a compliment to the Chinese government, because in recent years, let's say the last 20 years, China has invested a lot in its own universities to improve their quality over time. But at the same time, they provided funding for Chinese master's and PhD students to go study in other countries. And many of those students came to the US. Some of those students helped to start new startup companies, sometimes with a founder from the US. So these companies are born global. They are not thinking only about one country. They think about multiple countries from the birth of the company, because they already knew these people from their classes, from their interactions. So for someone in Turkey, for example, my advice would be fund some master's and PhD students and get them to come do some of their studies here. Encourage them to start new businesses with people that they meet here and bring some of that born global approach with them. So now it's not just a Turkish startup company.
Yeah, that's true.
Now it's a Turkish and French, Turkish and US, Turkish and China. All of these are possible in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. That's a long-term approach.
Yes, and this is something I congratulate the Chinese government. I think they have been doing it for a long time, long enough that they are really seeing the results now.
That's true. Actually, we don't have much time left. So as a final question, I would like to ask about the current AI revolution. So what do you think about AI and how do you make its relevance for the companies, maybe in terms of this open innovation efforts about the future of open innovation?
Like many people, I'm excited by AI.
Okay.
It's a powerful technology.
Some people are not excited, some people are frightened.
It's a very powerful technology, so it's important to be respectful and to anticipate that, yes, this can be used for wonderfully good things and also some pretty bad things. So that is true. But with AI, we see another turn of the innovation cycle, where a lot of the initial work has come, even though the research was being done in universities and large companies, a lot of the innovation, that translation we were talking about, is starting in startup companies. Even OpenAI, which is today a very large startup company, was in the beginning quite small. And a lot of the other leaders in AI started very small as well. So we see often that the ideas originate at the edge. But then we come to these ideas of business models. And right now, AI is in the midst of searching for the right business models. Google taught us with search for the internet that you could sell advertising. Well, when you use AI, who's going to see the ads? How do we create revenues out of the services that AI provides us? This is where we're going to need a lot of innovation because right now we don't really have good answers to that. Companies are spending huge amounts of money to pursue AI. No one is making nearly that amount of money in their businesses. So they need to solve this problem or it won't be sustainable. Now, I think AI will continue, but it might move from the very large companies to many smaller companies, including startups, and it might move from the proprietary models to more open source models of AI. And so I think in the future, we're going to see many kinds of AI rather than a single one model that rules all the other models. I don't think that's the future.
Okay, so you don't believe in this AGI?
I think AGI will be open and distributed.
Okay, that's cool.
I don't think it will be proprietary, closed, and a single monopoly.
Okay, that's good to hear, actually. Dear Henry, it was a great pleasure to be here with you, having this conversation. And I'm definitely sure that our audience enjoy this conversation a lot. So thank you once again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate the chance to speak with you.
Thank you so much. Bugün Kaliforniya Üniversitesi Berkeley'de sevgili Henry Chesbrough ile beraberdik. Kendisiyle açık inovasyonu, yapay zekayı, Silikon Vadisi'ni ve akademi endüstri işbirliğini konuştuk. Önümüzdeki hafta başka bir bölümde, başka bir mekanda ve birbirinden ilginç konuklarla görüşmek üzere.